Welcome to the Porch Roof Classic, a retro baseball podcast novel in 15 or so episodes by Jeff Pullman. Episode 13. My jitters about the classic peaked on Friday afternoon when Dad suddenly announced a family trip to Funland that night. In his college days, Phil was a frequent visitor to this sprawling, vibrant amusement park on the other side of the Connecticut in Chippewago, and liked to take us there or drop us off every year before Labor Day. He knew I had been working big time all summer, that the upcoming wiffle battle meant everything to me, and that a night of cotton candy and rides and snow cones and rides and greasy hot dogs and rides would be a reward and good nerve calmer. It also helped that Friday was Demolition Derby night, a yearly spectacle of auto carnage that satisfied any destructive impulses Dad possessed. Mom would usually sit beside him and endure the event by knitting scarves for us for the upcoming winter, while Robbie and I were off somewhere spinning and zooming. This time was different, though, because Helen came along. Not a fan of amusement parks, she was eager to examine the fuss, like the secret anthropologist she was, for the entire 20-minute drive to Chippewago. Do you think it's the fear of death that causes the thrill on a roller coaster, or the other way around? Huh? You know, that people in a strange way are welcoming death? I guess you'll find out when you get on a coaster, won't you? Said Dad. What makes you think I'm going on one? How else will you answer your question? He had a point, and it quieted Helen down for about half a minute before. What do you think early man's substitute was for amusement rides? With school on the horizon in a few weeks, Funland was its smelly, sticky, and teeming self. Endless lines for almost every ride. Me, Helen, and Robbie got blue Funland badges stapled to our shirts at the entrance, while Dad purchased demo derby tickets for he and Mom, who made sure she had everything she needed in her big knitting bag before looking at us. Don't lose your brother, and we'll see you back at this spot at 10 o'clock, okay? We nodded, and they headed off to the racetrack grandstand at the far end of the park. Helen and I each took one of Robbie's hands and began to walk, but he shrugged us off after a few yards, and we let him continue beside us, a confident adult look on his face for maybe the first time. Following a theme, Robbie was done with kiddie rides, so I took him on a couple of twirling contraptions called the Crab and the Octopus. Helen opted out and studied us from the rail, probably sad she didn't bring a legal pad and pen along to make notes. Robbie's face was a slight shade of green when he got off the octopus, but was still in goofy spirits. That was octastic, he crowed. But I think I need a drink now. Anything but food for you, I said. We all had large pink lemonades from a stand. Helen was definitely taken in by the neon and strobe lights and passing hordes of working-class families and black and Puerto Rican kids and occasional marshmallow faces I recognized. She even clutched my hand at one point. So much humanity in one spot and just blind to the world. What do you mean? They're having a blast. A temporary refuge, Joey. So much war and misery everywhere, and it's all just to help people look the other way. Jesus, don't be such a bummer. Can't you relax and have fun for one night? She screwed up her face at me. Can't you see I'm trying to? Not really. Let's go on the whiplash now, cried Robbie. I'm sorry, said Helen. She pecked my neck with a kiss, then sighed. I'll just keep my findings to myself. The whiplash was another barforama, and after we downed our lemonades, I was able to coax Helen into one of its seats with us. Robbie was wedged in the middle, and the moment the thing rose up in the air with a loud hiss and lurched left, Helen clamped her eyes shut. If I don't look, it's all fine. If I don't look, it's all fine, she repeated. And when the seat dropped like a boulder and lurched right and spun around, she let out a guttural shriek that was more like a chipmunk about to be flattened by a semi. I'm welcoming death and I'm okay. I'm welcoming death and I'm okay. Her panicked yelps were thankfully drowned out by riders' screams. When we wobbled out the exit gate, she paused, shot out a quick geyser of pink vomit, and beamed at me. Ooh, boy. Took care of that. The Mad Cat was the best roller coaster and by all accounts the best ride at Funland. Its high looping metal track rose at the southern end of the park. 5 multicolored metal cars zipped around and made impossible turns and drops. Screams and shouts filled the air, and an entrance line zigzagged up a wooden ramp and stretched out to a caramel apple stand. Every size, shape, and genre of amusement park humanity swarmed the back of the line. 2 Latin dudes with their halter-topped girlfriends were right in front of us, all electricity and hip movements and laughter, in a language that was foreign to me back then. Helen loved them on sight, of course. What she wore was as far from a halter top as possible, though. Dark jeans and a long-sleeved paisley shirt buttoned to the neck. Anyway, she cracked jokes with them in Spanish before long, and I have to admit I just stood there and watched her for a while. A pair of 9-year-old hoods who were likely from Connecticut or maybe even Marsh Meadows slipped in behind us. Both wore white T-shirts flecked with mustard and cigarette ash, and I could smell their Winston breath from a few feet away. "How long is this line going to take?" whined Robbie from below, already anxious about the coaster and now about the wait. "I'd say 20 minutes to half an hour. There's a bathroom right over there if you have to go pee." "No, God dang it." I shook Helen's arm and she spun around from her non-cocktail party. "You know these people?" I asked. "Of course not. What's up?" "Nothing, just that it's Robbie's first roller coaster, see, and he's a little wigged out. I can tell." "No biggie." She walked up and playfully laid her elbow on his head. "What's shaking, little bacon?" "Don't call me little bacon, okay?" He poked her. "I don't even like bacon." "Fine. Hey, you're going to be the first kid in your new class to say he rode the Mad Cat this summer, right?" His face brightened a bit. "I guess I might be. Yep." We moved up the ramp about 1.5 feet. Helen leaned into his ear. "I promise not to barf on this one if you don't, because if you do, it could end up in my face." Robbie giggled at that, and they tickled each other a few times, and then everything was fine, and we moved up maybe 3 feet. A little black kid hopped the fence up ahead and within 20 seconds was being hauled down the ramp by a Funland security guard. Helen made a distinct pig snort sound as the guard passed, then pretended it wasn't her. "Officer! Oh, officer!" This new voice came from maybe a yard behind us, and it froze my bones. Raspy and dripping with privilege, it could only be one person. I turned and saw the rusty hair, the pale face, the cunning green eyes of Danny Blight. The security guard had paused beside him. "Officer, after you're done with that truant, you may want to come right back for those other people I saw cut in line." The guard glanced around. "Who was that?" "That little kid up there in the Yaz shirt, and his older brother, and the skanky girl they're with." He was grinning at us. The only thing that kept me from diving over the 2 9-year-olds and landing a punch in his face was a fear of losing our place in line. "Let me deal with this first," said the guard, and marched the black kid away. Helen had turned back to her new Latin pals and missed the exchange. "Nice one, asshead," I said to Danny. Robbie's eyes bugged out. "Ooh, nasty language won't erase what I saw. You didn't see squat. We got in back of the line just like you did." "Hi, loser." It was Jamie Steger, who I hadn't even seen, standing right behind Danny, her eyes bombed with mascara and long-nailed hands gripping his waist. I shook my head and turned back around, but knew ignoring them was going to fail. "A little motion sickness is probably a good way to prepare for my fastballs at your head, Tosh. But this cutting in line thing—" "We didn't cut in line, you dick." Now everyone around us was tuned in, especially Helen Fishblatt. "What's going on?" "Never mind. Danny's here and being a Nazi as usual." "Danny Blight? Really?" She inched around me, and then the 9-year-old's mad glee on her face. "I've always wanted to meet a Gestapo." "Helen, no." I tried to grab her, but she slipped free and stepped right up to Danny's face. "How's the weather in Munich, Fritz?" "Get lost, freak," barked Jamie. "No, seriously, I know it's warm and humid there during the summer, but was just wondering if any cold fall weather had kicked in yet." "Ha," said Danny. "So are you his sister, his cousin, or his coos?" "Maybe all three. How does that grab your shriveled nuts?" Danny's eyes erupted, and he shoved her back with a forearm. She teetered on the ramp, then lunged back and stopped even closer to his face. "Sticks and stones, Fritz. Sticks, stones, names, etc. Even macho posturing. None of it hurts me." She turned on a heel to walk away, and Jamie hocked up a massive loogie and launched it. Helen felt it splat in her hair and whirled. threw herself at Jamie like a pro linebacker. Danny jumped between them, caught her around the neck. I pushed Robbie aside, hopped into the blender myself. Jamie tried to grab Helen, but Danny was in the way. I reached for his arm. Helen's foot slipped, and Danny and Jamie fell on top of her, and then my arm was pinned beneath all three of them, and I was howling in pain, and people in line were trying to pry them off, and the security guard was back up the ramp, but by that point, I was almost blacking out. Helen and Robbie finally found my parents in the Bavarian beer garden 15 minutes after the demolition derby ended. Dad was only 3 sips into his mug of Spaten Oktoberfest and still had beer foam on his mouth as he helped me walk to the car. Danny and Jamie had run off like the cowards I knew they were after everyone got pried apart, and Robbie blurted out curse words in Danny's direction I didn't even think existed. They took x-rays of my whole arm before they put it in a sling at the closest Springfield hospital, then made me wait on a bed with Helen and Robbie while Mom and Dad whispered with a doctor on the other side of a curtain. Helen had her arms folded and a lost look on her face. I can't believe your bad cosmic luck. The day before the game, this happens? Screw cosmic, said Robbie. It's bull poop. No, it's cosmic, she said, reached over to put her hand on mine. And it was also my fault. I'm so frickin' sorry. No, you were amazing, I said. Mom and Dad reappeared from behind the curtain in various shades of glum. It's only a bad shoulder sprain, thank God, said Dad. But still a sprain, so no ball game for you tomorrow. Yeah, no shit. What's that? Forget it. We're so sorry, said Mom. We know how much you were looking forward to this. And practicing for it over and over, added Robbie, nearly in tears. Mom gave him a quick, hearty snuggle. I understand, continued Dad, but like they say, every hard-shell crab has sweet meat inside. Helen looked at me, then at him. Who the hell said that? They did, or I did. Who cares? The sweet meat part is that I got a little time off work, and we're going down to Rhode Island on Monday. A little beach getaway before school starts. Crap, I knew that was coming. For how long? Asked Helen, suddenly very interested. Dad shrugged. 2 or 3 days, tops. They have those big waves you like, Joey, said my mother. Mom, I cried, holding up my slinged arm. Oh, right, sorry. Well, you can still dunk your feet in them. Helen quietly paced around the half room, thought, and finally coughed to get my parents' attention. I can house sit for you, you know. Oh, said Dad in surprise. We hadn't thought of that. Unless, of course, you thought I was coming along to Rhode Island, because that would be far out, too. She let out her horsey laugh. Actually, said Mom, looking at Dad only, having Helen take care of the house might not be the worst thing. I didn't want to bring up South Hadley just then, or that it actually could be the worst thing. Instead, I held my tongue. The house-sitting deal was struck, and that was that. I hate Rhode Island, grumbled Robbie, kicking at the air with his sneakers. He wasn't kidding. We'd done this very same little beach getaway for 3 straight years, and Robbie would have liked nothing more than to erase every one of them from his mind. The first time was a bedwetting spectacular in which we had to change hotel rooms twice in one night. A beach sanitation worker with a club foot spooked him into an anxiety attack on the second visit, and for the most recent finale, he came down with the flu. Come on, Robbie, I said, like I always did. There's tons of fun in Misquamicut. No, there isn't. I hate Misquamicut. You hate the big Ferris wheel and the fried clams with bellies and the lobster tails for Mom and Dad? He puffed his cheeks out after a bit of thought. Okay. But I get the outside seat on the wheel. Only if you open your eyes this time. Deal. For real? Emma Peel. Come here. I hugged him with my sling-free arm, gave his messy hair a kiss. Don't let one of those big dumb waves knock me down, okay? I won't. Izzy and Jean bought me lunch at Friendly's on Saturday, the day the Porch Roof Classic was supposed to happen. Izzy was the one who called Danny to tell him the game was off, but Danny had pretty much guessed it and sank low enough to whine about the minor scratch on his neck Helen had given him in the Mad Cat brawl. Big fat shock, said Jean. Did the baby get himself a tetanus shot? Don't think so. Did he sound happy? I asked, about me wrecking my arm. Wouldn't say he was happy, but he did ask for how long you'd be out of action, as he put it. If I was there last night, he'd be in traction, said Jean. This just sucks, moaned Izzy, who had only taken one sip of his fribble. Now we got this jerk taunting our butts the entire first year of high school. The hell we do, said Jean. Soon as Joey's arm is working, we're playing this game. I don't care if it's Thanksgiving and we freeze our tinkles off. My doctor said it shouldn't take that long. Okay then, Halloween weekend. We can dress up like ninjas with hockey masks. Perfect, cried Izzy. And I'll be Lee Marvin in the Dirty Dozen. Guys, I said, I wouldn't get too nutty and flipped out yet. There's a chance the whole rivalry will cool down because of the Funland thing, and we won't even have to play. I can't believe you're saying this, said Izzy. Actually, I couldn't either. But hell, it was on my mind, and now out of my mouth. I mean, every horrible person has something good inside them, right? Most likely they were created by a mom and a dad who were in love, even just for one night. In Danny's case, Izzy replied, $20, it was a drunk accident. Jean nudged me. Sounds like you've been hanging out with old Peace and Love Helen a lot. I got news for you. Peace and Love Helen made the first shove last night, after Jamie hocked a loogie at her. But up until then, she was only using smart words and messing with Danny's head. Jean pointed to my wounded arm. Yeah, and look where that got us. Dad gave Helen detailed lawn water instructions. Mom showed her how to work the washer and dryer, wrote the name and phone numbers of our hotel and half a dozen neighbors in case of house emergency, and we left in the stuffed Catalina first thing Monday morning. It would only be a 3-night vacation, but as usual, Mom made sure we had enough supplies for an Amazon expedition. Misquamicut State Beach in Rhode Island was almost a 2-hour drive and gave Robbie and me lots of time to play our favorite car game, Mustangs and Volkswagens. I always took the Mustangs going in the opposite direction, while Robbie always kicked my butt counting VW bugs, which at that time poured over U.S. highways like round-headed cockroaches. We stopped at a Dairy Queen in Norwich for lunch, where Robbie killed a bee on our outdoor table by squashing it with his milkshake cup, and then we were on to Westerly, the first Rhode Island town over the border. It would have been just as easy to go to Ocean Beach Park in New London, but Dad liked the exotic sensation of crossing a state line. It being the last official week of summer, Westerly was clogged with families and roving packs of teens. Dad had asked the motel guy on the phone for a Block Island view, but the last room available at the Misquamicut Motor Court was on the back side, with a perfect vista of a row of trash cans, scary sandbox play area, and the owner's de-wheeled, broken-down Rambler up on cinder blocks. The room's TV did get Providence's Red Sox channel, so it was inevitable that Robbie wanted to stay in the motel rather than go out for seafood the first night. After he threw a fit about it for a good 5 minutes, Dad unplugged the TV's antenna when his back was turned to show him how the set was on the blink, so may as well go out for dinner until the picture clears up. The fried clams with bellies at this old place with the bizarre name of the Olympia Tea Room were fantastic, and I almost ate an entire plate of them. Dad enjoyed the cold draft he was denied at the Funland beer garden, even though it was a Narragansett, and filled his mouth and smacked his lips with lobster meat. Robbie's grumbling finally stopped, and the dinner felt like the start of a real vacation. On my way to the restroom, I paused at the bar, where a television showed footage of a huge anti-war protest that day in Boston's Copley Square. Young people were being loaded into police vans, and a Boston squad car had been set on fire. A second TV had the Red Sox game on, being played just down the street from the protest, and I asked a guy on a stool for the score before returning to our table. Sox lead the Tigers 1-0 in the third. I whispered that in Robbie's ear. He came to life with a grin, began to munch his neglected fish and chips. How'd they score? Geez, I don't know. All I could really think about was that protest footage I had seen, but had no desire to share it with my folks. I didn't sleep well that night because Robbie snored on his cot a few inches away from mine, and a teeter-totter in the scary playground outside the window kept creaking in the ocean breeze. I got up before the sun did, carefully and quietly slid a bunch of my dad's loose change off his night table, and went out and around to the motel lobby. Loaded most of the coins into a payphone there, the motel's front desk not even occupied yet, and dialed our home number. Yeah, hello? Mumbled Helen after 5 or 6 rings. Hey, sorry to wake you. It's Joey. Hi. What happened? Nothing. It's just that I saw this thing on TV last night about a big Boston anti-war protest and made me think about you. That's real nice, but I was kind of asleep here. Like I thought maybe you knew some of the people that got arrested. There was a long, silent pause. I'm not Pancho Villa, you know. I blanked on the name. Meaning it's not like we're revolutionaries and all know each other. The war is terrible and illegal and costing American lives, and protesting it is the natural thing to do. So if you ask me, it's like someone saying the sun came up. I'm sorry. I was just, oh, stop being sorry all the time, Joey. Just have a good time in Rhode Island and go back to sleep. And don't worry about me, all right? I'm a big girl. I began to apologize again, but stopped myself, said bye, and just hung up. What I probably wanted to say was how much I was starting to really like her and care about her, but it was too early in the morning to drop that bomb or to come up with a plan to defuse it. They had a chalkboard by the entrance to Misquamicut Beach that posted the times for low and high tide, but it was hard to read as we drove into the lot because damp sea mist obliterated a few of the numbers. Whatever the hell tide it was, the waves were huge, and kids trying to body surf were pummeled and somersaulted, and the lifeguards walked back and forth on the sand with their large bullhorns, trying to keep damage to a minimum. I figured there was a better chance of me taking Robbie to the moon and getting him in the water, which was fine, because it was sunny and warm on the actual beach, and Mom had bought us salami sandwiches and Dr. Peppers at the town market. The beach towel scene was something else. Towel after towel after towel, then maybe a blanket, then another towel, all of them inches apart and laid out in a perfect beach grid like an aerial photo of Manhattan. I ate my sandwich and looked at a few baseball magazines while Robbie thumbed through baseball cards. He had a separate little stack of unwanted souls, the Vern Fullers and Coco LeBoys of the world, just for sandy occasions like this. Ain't No Mountain High Enough by Diana Ross was the #1 song in the country, so of course we could hear its blaring echoes from a handful of beach radios. Red Sox are up 8-1 after 3, said my dad to Robbie, back from a beverage stand with a gleam in his eye. Canigliaro just hit a slam. Whoop! Yelled Robbie. He did a happy cartwheel right on our blanket, landed on his feet, and launched back into his goofy Red Sox dance. Rico woo! Yes woo hoo! Tony see yee hee! Mom watched him and glowed like a lantern. Dad was back in his chair to work on his Sunday New York Times crossword puzzle, a chore that always made him feel good just by attempting it. I walked to the water's edge, half-heartedly started on a sandcastle with my good arm. Robbie got sick of dancing after a few minutes and joined me, dredged and paved the road to the future castle's front gate with a popsicle stick. Might be better if you helped me with the walls, I said. Nah, you're better at those, he said, ignoring my obvious liability. We going on the big wheel later? Maybe. I don't know. He sighed. I could tell he was already anxious about it. We made some headway on the castle before a rogue wave came out of nowhere, obliterated the thing, and spilled us into the surf. Dumb, stupid ocean, yelled my brother, spat out some salty water, and flung his popsicle stick at it. I plucked a flat rock out of the sand as the surf receded, peeled off a hunk of seaweed, and clumsily tried to whip it across the water with my left hand. It plopped pathetically into the surf 4 feet away. Man, this sucks. Another big wave knocked us over. Robbie yelped and laughed this time. I stood back up, muddy salt water flooding my suit, and realized the sling on my right arm had come off in the impact. Uh-oh, said Robbie. Screw it. I grabbed another flat rock, prepared my right arm, and hurled the thing with a 3/4 underhand motion like Ted Abernathy used to do pitching for the Cubs. The rock skipped 5 times across the water like a dragonfly on a pond. Holy moly, uttered Robbie. He quickly located and handed me a third flat rock. Do that again. I reared back and repeated the motion. The rock did the exact same thing, with an extra merry skip for good measure. Did that hurt? My shoulder did a little, but my arm didn't. We stared at each other, crazy possibilities already being imagined. I squeezed the seawater out of my sling and sloppily put it back on so Mom and Dad wouldn't notice anything odd. The moment we got back to the motel and showered and changed, Robbie and I were hoofing it up the road into town. What if they don't have 'em? He asked. Then we looked somewhere else. Thankfully, Ossie's Market had wiffle balls, though it took us about 10 minutes of rummaging through styrofoam surfboards, sand shoes, shovels and pails, a few hula hoops, and toy parachutes with plastic paratroopers attached before we found them. We didn't even wait to get back to the motel, ducked down the first alley we passed. I broke open the ball box, positioned Robbie about 30 feet away, had him stand sideways as if holding a bat, waited for an ocean breeze to die down, then slung the ball with the same weird motion. It did the impossible, hopped around in midair with a plastic mind of its own, before curving and dipping away from Robbie. "Forget holy moly!" cried Robbie, as astonished as me. "Holy shit!" Just to be sure, I tried about 4 more throws, changed the position of the wiffle ball holes in my hand each time, and watched the glorious sphere dipsy and doodle in all sorts of unhittable ways. The two of us were so delighted we forgot to ask Dad if we could ride the big wheel later. Dad and Mom were in the bathroom that night when I pocketed the rest of Dad's change and ran back out to the payphone. "Hi, Mrs. Blight. Danny there?" I'm not sure. I think he's sleeping." "Could you try knocking on his door?" "Excuse me? I gotta talk to him. It's Joey." She groaned and put the receiver down. A minute or so later, a sour Danny picked it up. "Yeah? You okay?" "What do you want, Taj?" "Just telling you the game's back on." "Really? Says who? Dr. Kildare?" "Says me. Made a quick recovery. I don't know. Must have been the ocean air in Rhode Island." "Uh-huh. Or maybe you got all numbed up on illegal drugs and you're afraid to tell me." "Sure, Danny, that's it. My house with your team this Saturday at noon?" "Oh, you bet your butt, cripple." You've been listening to The Porch Roof Classic by Jeff Pullman. This retro baseball podcast novel was made possible by Spotify for podcasters and Buzzsprout. Be sure to basket catch another episode next week. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to contribute, go to buymeacoffee.com/jpullman54v. Thanks.